Good morning, guys. So it is about 9 o'clock in the morning. This is how much the leaven has risen. You can see the bubbles in it. You can kind of see what I was talking about before, that the surface is a little bit domed. That means it's still on the rise. And the way we check to see if the leaven is ready to use to make bread is called the float test. And it means if a little piece of this, and I like to use something with a sharp metal edge, like a tablespoon or a regular spoon, to kind of cut it out of there instead of using a soft spatula to kind of drag it out, because if you drag it out, all the air will come out of it. And what we're trying to see is if it will float. And if it does, it's ready to make bread. It's ready to support the structure of the bread. Isn't that cool? Science. It's definitely floating, so we are ready to make bread. Get that out of the way. And so, leaven is ready. I've got 900 grams of bread flour and 100 grams of whole wheat flour. And the way to do it is, again, on the scale, measuring in grams. You measure the bread flour out first, then just hit 0 on your scale and add the other 100 grams of flour. My hands are washed. And I like to obviously mix it in. You don't want one big clump of whole wheat flour. And so that's mixed. And I also have, so there's 1,000 grams of flour total and 700 grams of 80-degree water. Now you notice the water is getting warmer and warmer each time. The warmer the water is, the more it helps the rise of the bread and the activity of the natural yeast. I would say the activity of the bacteria, but I don't want to freak anybody out. Oops, I just did. And then you're going to add first, once the flour is kind of mixed all around together, in a bowl. Now you've got all your components. In a bowl, big bowl to mix in. Going to add first 200 grams of the leaven. And it smells a little funky. It's all right. The book describes different ways that your leaven or your starter should smell. Never made too much sense to me. You might just be like, oh, that smells funky. Ooh, I need 2 more grams. Oh, that's 205. So now I'm gonna take a little out. 200 on the nose. And we are good to go. Now, keep your leaven to the side because you're gonna feed this just like we did the starter the first day. So I'm gonna take 25 grams of this starter and 50 grams of water and 50 grams of flour. And that becomes your new starter. All right, so now we zero out the scale. We have 200 grams of leaven. We are going to, just like we do with the starter, you always want to add the water next because we're going to mix it in with our hand to make that cloudy water just like we did before. It's kind of cool as it kind of floats the leaven too. It's a lot of water. It's 80 degrees. If your house is really cold, if it's the middle of winter and you keep your heat low, you can increase the heat of the water by a couple of degrees. It's going to be in the 60s in my house today. at very most 68 usually. So what I think I'm gonna do is raise the heat up in the house. I have a bread proofing drawer, but the result comes out a little bit differently. So that's 701 grams of water. So I'm gonna scoop out a tiny bit. 700 grams of water. And now we just mix. This is very exciting. Yeah, see the leaven, you can't see it, but the leaven is actually floating in the 700 grams of water. The fact that it is 700 grams of water to 1,000 grams of flour speaks to what they call hydration in bread. The hydration can be higher or lower depending on the consistency of bread you are going for. And also maybe if you're putting other things in it, like seeds and nuts, or a drier flour, or you're using rye flour, you're using different flours. You may end up playing with the hydration, or it may be perfectly fine. I know I've always stuck with this. Some people move to higher hydration, which makes a much softer, stickier, wetter dough. I like this. It works for me. I get great bread. So this is all mixed in. Again, see, we have our cloudy water with no lumps of the leaven in it or anything. And then you add your flour. So we're gonna get this mixed by hand into a shaggy dough. And then you actually you cover it with plastic wrap, and you let it rest, I think, 20 to 35 minutes. And it's gonna look like a really raggedy dough. And you wanna make sure that there are no lumps of flour, no streaks of flour. So this process takes a minute, and it gets very kind of difficult because your hand gets cemented together. But the reason you let it sit first before you do anything else, before you add a little bit more water and a little salt, is a process called autolyse, and it's the flour accepting and really incorporating into itself the water. So you're just really doing sort of an initial hydration of the flour with the water. I'm gonna go ahead. This is what it starts to look like. There's still some flour spots that I can see, and some in the bowl at the bottom. You've got to kind of work in. So I'm not gonna bore you with that. Gonna get that done, and I'll be back.